Hello, I'm Schuh and this is Procurement in the Park. So over the past couple of weeks I got a couple of requests to talk about supplier relationship management, and interestingly enough most of these requests came from oil and gas companies. So let's now take a closer look at the SRM framework. So we have two main axes. So we have the vertical axis, and on the vertical axis we are measuring the current performance of the suppliers. So which means how well are the suppliers performing in today's business. And every company is measuring that to a certain extent, and typically these companies measure some variant of time, cost and quality. Now we go to the second dimension, so the horizontal axis, and here it becomes really interesting. So on the horizontal axis we are measuring the strategic potential of our suppliers. And strategic potential means what could these suppliers be to us in an ideal future. So now with these two axes we have a framework, a two-dimensional framework, and in our view of SRM, now we populate this framework with 9 distinct interaction models, and you see them here. So let's now systematically go through each of these 9 interaction models, starting from the top left-hand side corner. So harvest. Harvest is a situation where we are working with a supplier that has excellent performance. So we are very happy with the supplier in terms of reliability, we are very happy with the supplier in terms of cost, and we are very happy with the supplier in terms of quality. At the same time, the supplier has very limited strategic potential. So what do we do with the supplier? We just keep on doing business as usual. So there's no need to change anything in this type of relationship. So let's now move down from this somewhat ideal situation with a supplier who has limited strategic potential, so one notch down. So here we have the typical supplier, so a supplier with just average performance and limited strategic potential. So here we want to interfere to a certain extent with the objective of improving the performance of the suppliers. So I'm using plural here because these are many suppliers and there will be typically many competitors going for the same type of business. But we want to improve these suppliers without dedicating too many of our own resources. Which now brings us to the lowest portion in the first column. This is mitigate. So if a supplier really slips in terms of performance, here normally the next step would be phasing the supplier out. So normally suppliers in the first column with limited strategic potential should be commodity, right? So there should be many other suppliers who can perform the same task. So if the supplier slips, there's not much point in dedicating resources to improving the supplier's performance. Rather, let's do a quick and painless supplier switch. Okay, so this is the first column. So in the second column we have suppliers that are interesting in terms of strategy. So suppliers who can make a difference, but typically suppliers that are working with all of your competitors. So very often this would be technology providers who set certain standards for the industry. So for example, for the airline industry, this would be Boeing and Airbus, right? So Boeing and Airbus will always sell aircraft to all airlines. And staying at the example, so normally both Boeing and Airbus have excellent performance, so they know what they're doing. But what can the airline do? So this brings us to the top interaction model here in this column. This would be influence. So again, in the aircraft industry, this would be called a launch customer. So if an aircraft maker like Boeing or Airbus is considering launching a new aircraft, they would be looking for a launch customer. And they need to bring these launch customers in to make the business case viable for them. And by committing to be a launch customer, the airline then also has some say on for example, the cabin layout. They would have a time to market advantage. So they would be the first one to introduce this aircraft to the market, and then also benefit from being innovative, having something new. So this would also bolster the reputation of the aircraft. So again, in this what we call influence model is we would try to influence a product, a new product, an innovation of this technology supplier. So by making the business case viable for the supplier, this would give us a certain time to market advantage, but after whatever, half a year, 2 years, all of our competitors would have the same product. So you need to have a very clear-eyed view on this. Now moving one notch down, so these are technology suppliers with just okayish performance. So this also happens. Industry standard suppliers with just okayish performance. So here we should strive to find a good equilibrium between helping the supplier to meet our standards without going overboard, because if we go overboard by helping the supplier, this will always also help our competitors. So this is why we call it sustain. So let's achieve a good balance between the resources we commit and the benefit we get out of this without overcommitting, and then in the end just helping our competitors. So the last model here is develop. So talking about industry standards, sometimes there may be limited choice when we are dealing with industry standard suppliers. Very often there are mergers and acquisitions, so there may not be sufficient choice in the market. And this is when we may have to help create a new competitor. So there are always like startups, spin-offs out in the market. And in such a specific situation, it actually may make sense to dedicate some resources, invest some money to help a new player in the market emerge. We call this develop. But again, we would only do this if there's not enough choice in the market. So now we are in the right column, and here it's really becoming interesting. So here we are dealing with suppliers who have very big strategic potential for us. And any company typically does not have more than a handful of suppliers in this column. And if you're very, very lucky, one of these suppliers actually has super high current performance. And in this case, the recommendation would be integrate as well as you can with the supplier. So integrate doesn't mean that you should acquire this supplier, but integrate means that it should work as if you were one company. And this means you're not competing. So you would not work with any other supplier, and this supplier would not work with any other customer in this market segment. And the best example I have found out there is Red Bull and its bottler. The bottler is a mid-sized Austrian fruit juice company called Rauch, and Rauch has been with Red Bull since day one. When Red Bull sold their first can, Rauch was there, and now that Red Bull is selling billions of cans, it is still Rauch. And working with one bottler gives Red Bull enormous advantage over their soft drink competitors who typically have like 100 bottlers across the world. Red Bull is super fast and nimble. So if Red Bull wants to do something, they can execute this simultaneously across the globe, whereas other companies would have to convince all the bottlers, and it would take many years to get things done. But having this situation is not typical, so anyway, you need to consider yourself lucky if you have suppliers in the right column. Those you have are likely to have again just average current performance, and here it would actually make sense to really invest. And invest can be investing your time, your ideas, your resources, your creativity, or actually also investing some money in order to develop this supplier up to be qualified for an integrate model. And why does this make sense here and not sense in the middle column? Because in the middle column you will always also benefit your competitors. Over here you would do this exclusively just for you. So big difference. And then you may ask now what's at the very bottom. So what is a supplier with high strategic potential and low current performance? And this is typically startup. So you have a startup company, a company who has a very convincing technology, a great innovation. So your engineers, your product marketing people may be super excited about it, so they can do a demo, they can do 10 samples. And then it's very important not to go overboard, because making 10 samples and then asking for I need 100,000 units or 1 million units, this is a recipe for disaster. So I've seen clients who went down that route, then had enormous problems, poured in millions and millions of dollars to rescue the supplier, but afterwards they were so fed up that they pulled out. Guess what happened next? One of their competitors comes in and then uses this supplier and benefits from all the work you have been doing. So in such a situation, so you have an interesting startup that you would like to bring into your new product generations, treat them as a crisis case from day one. Assume that the worst will happen, and then develop the supplier over a couple of years up to improve, and then finally to integrate. That way. So this is the SRM concept in a nutshell. I would be really interested to see how the concept resonates with you. As always, I would encourage you to read the book. The book is a lot more detailed than what I can do in this video. I would also be interested to understand the interest of the SRM framework in different industries. So is what I'm seeing right now that the oil and gas companies are most interested in that. So I still find this surprising. Is something specific happening in oil and gas that I don't know? So why is it so interesting? For which other industries could the SRM model be relevant? Please let me know down below. As always, I will come back with an answer within 24 hours. If you would like to subscribe, click here. And if you would want to see another one of my videos, click over here. And thank you guys for watching, and see you next time. Bye!